This is Green Street, the environmental health show, greenstreetnews.org, Patti and Doug Wood, and our worldwide network of medical experts, researchers, reporters, authors, and others, all here each week to keep you informed about what's happening in the world of environmental health and what you need to know to keep yourself and your family safe and healthy in this increasingly toxic and, unfortunately, increasingly deregulated world. Welcome back. The invention of the electric light bulb fundamentally reshaped human life in ways that still define our modern society. The light bulb allowed people to work, to read, to socialize well after sunset. With artificial light available anytime, people began going to bed later and waking up earlier. This shift had long-term effects on daily routines and, importantly, even human biology. Today on Green Street, we're going to reprise an interview we did a few years ago with our friend Dr. Josh Rosenthal, talking about how our body responds to natural light and unnatural light, especially the blue light from television and computer screens and smartphones, and how it is affecting our biology, whether we realize it or not. It's really important information for everyone, so please stay tuned for that. But first, some of the headlines of the week. Patti, what do you got for us this week?
Well, the EPA and the plastics industry want to call plastic recycling manufacturing so they can get around government regulations on emissions from burning.
It's not manufacturing. We're not making stuff, right?
We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but the story is evolving.
Okay.
So now the Environmental Protection Agency is reconsidering whether facilities that recycle plastic chemically should be held to the same strict air pollution standards as incinerators. The possible change is alarming environmental advocates who say it would lead to more dangerous pollution spewing into communities with fewer or no checks at the federal level.
Isn't incineration burning something?
Yes.
So how is this not burning something? How is it not incineration?
That's what they do with plastic.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
While dozens of countries and many environmental groups have urged a limit to plastic production, industry and several big oil-producing countries have resisted, arguing instead for just better recycling and reuse programs. Meanwhile, the plastic recycling industry is pumping millions of tons of plastic pollution into the environment every year. When we're talking about plastic pollution, we're talking about all the chemicals that are used in plastic production are being spewed into the air, but also the issue of micro and nanoplastics coming out of those plants.
Yeah.
That to me
it's
is
not like burning paper or burning wood or
we're
forest.
We're talking about pumping millions of tons of plastic pollution into the environment. Chemical recycling uses heat or chemicals to break down plastics. The main method, a process known as pyrolysis, has long been regulated as incineration by the Clean Air Act. That's because exactly what it is. The EPA limits emissions from incinerators of 9 air pollutants, including toxic particulates, heavy metals, and dioxins. Judith Enck, former EPA regional administrator who now heads up Beyond Plastics, opposes what she said would be, quote, a much weaker level of environmental protection. Chemical recycling companies know that if they want to operate, they need to get this essential clean air permit, and they don't like it. They have spent decades trying to convince EPA to change the rules of the game. Republican and Democratic administrations have declined to do this, but they have hit the jackpot with the Trump administration.
Oh boy, here we go.
End quote.
Yeah.
The EPA regulates pyrolysis under Section 129 of the Act, which reduces air pollution from 4 categories of solid waste incineration units. EPA says it's now taking public comments for a potential rule change that would recognize pyrolysis as manufacturing instead, under a different section of the Clean Air Act.
It's so ridiculous. Oh, we're going to call it something else, and now you can spew as much toxin as you want into the air.
Well, the plastics industry, i.e. the fossil fuel industry, is basically rewriting the rules.
What about those people that live near those plants?
Oh, fence-line communities are just taking a huge hit with all of this plastic, quote-unquote, recycling.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that. I have a related story. Here's a story about trash traps. You ever heard of a trash trap?
No.
Last year, 130 million tons of plastic waste ended up in the environment, and a new report from the Pew Charitable Trusts projects that plastic pollution will more than double by 2040, an amount equivalent to dumping a garbage truck's worth of plastic every second.
Every second.
Every second. But along comes a partial solution: trash traps, mechanical devices that sift plastic and other debris out of waterways. These mechanical machines may seem like no match for this deluge, but from the trash rises an invaluable treasure: data. Trash traps not only drastically cut down on plastic pollution in waterways, they identify local sources of pollution and upstream solutions. In Maryland's Baltimore Harbor, data from Mr. Trash Wheel, which is this giant googly-eyed trash trap thing that consumes up to 500 tons of litter and debris each year, was used to support a statewide ban on polystyrene foam products and a citywide ban on plastic bags. Since 2019, foam litter caught in Mr. Trash Wheel has gone down by 90%. Wow. And plastic bag litter by 72%. This is a big change.
Yeah.
In California, trash trap data led to a plastic water bottle ban in the city of South Lake Tahoe. The International Trash Trap Network, did you know there was such a thing?
Nope.
Has grown to include more than 150 local programs across 12 countries since it launched in 2021, and it has contributed to a global picture of plastic pollution. Its 2024 report found that the top 5 macro debris items from trash traps were, you ready? Cigarette butts, which do contain plastic, plastic bags, plastic bottles, food wrappers, and foam pieces.
I tend to think of cigarette butts as being tiny little things. It's the filter, right?
It's
That's
the filter.
made from
Yeah,
plastic?
it's the filter,
Yeah.
which always gets thrown away, right? You don't smoke the filter, so you
Right.
smoke it down to the filter and then you throw that away. Local policy making to prevent plastic pollution is sometimes hindered by state law, however. In the U.S., here we go, several states have introduced preemption laws that prohibit local ordinances aimed at reducing plastic pollution. In North Carolina, for instance, state lawmakers in 2023 banned local governments from banning plastic containers. Since then, trash trap data has shown that 96% of the waste collected in North Carolina streams is plastic. Oh, man, you can't make this stuff up.
Okay.
Anyway, all right, we'll be right back. The sun comes up and the sun goes down. Every 24 hours, the Earth rotates once, daytime and nighttime, light and dark. We tend to ignore the Earth's rhythm. When the sun goes down, we turn on the lights, we watch TV, we write emails, text on our phones. It could be 9 o'clock or midnight or 3 in the morning. Makes no difference to us. But it makes a big difference to our body.
Like all living things, we have evolved to function with the rhythm of the sun. And whether we choose to ignore it or not, our internal body clocks are tuned to that rhythm. Now we're beginning to understand that fooling our bodies about time and trying to override the Earth's clock can have a real impact on our health. Dr. Josh Rosenthal is a board-certified sleep physician and head and neck specialist. After using light and circadian biology to successfully treat his own weight and health issues, he continued studying biophysics and discovered why healthcare is failing miserably at keeping people well. Doug and I spoke with Dr. Rosenthal earlier this week, and we talked about how technology has dramatically increased our exposure to harmful blue light and what we can do about it. Here's our conversation with Dr. Josh Rosenthal.
It's not that the tech is evil, per se, and it's not that, tech doesn't help us and generate some good things. I mean, we're here,
Exactly.
different places right now talking. I could be across the world and we could be having, a face-to-face communication. So there are good things, but it's how the tech is delivered. That is where the devil is in the details. So like, again, on my screen right now, I have a blue blocking filter software right on my screen. So I'm seeing you probably in a warmer, more yellow-orange hue than you really exist in real life. But this is how I can mitigate some of the problems, right? My glasses incorporate a way of mitigating the tech. So once you understand how it truly works on a physics standpoint, in the cell, in the brain, in the eyes, in the skin, then you can say, okay, I still need to interact with the world in the way the world works. So this is the infrastructure of our world, whether we like it or not. I mean, right, Patty? I mean, most of what you do uses the very things that we're fighting against to try to take action.
100%.
So that's the dichotomy. That's the oxymoron of all this, is that, we have to understand it better than most so that we, in doing this work, can mitigate our own health detriment to fighting the good fight, to enacting the change that we want to see.
Yeah, I really don't think that most people have any idea of the power of light. It's
really complicated stuff, and nobody's out there really explaining it. And certainly the authorities that we look to, and I'll just use medicine as a field, physicians do not understand physics. I focus on part of the electromagnetic spectrum that we can see, because the first thing is, when we talk about Wi-Fi and cell phones and stuff, you can't see that, but there's a light on my face and I can see it. Light, the visible light spectrum, is the one that we ought to focus on, because at least when we turn on a light, we know it's there. This is the gateway into the physics, and it's very well studied. I mean, there are Nobel Prizes given out for light therapy. Well, why don't we know more about it?
Well, that's why you're here today. You're going to tell us a little bit more about it and how it's affecting ourselves, but mostly our kids, because they, I think, as a demographic, they are spending more time on screens. Kids, they spend every waking moment. It's hard to find a time when it wouldn't be, when that device wouldn't be in their hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the gateway into understanding this is very simple. There are light signals that are made by nature, i.e. the sun, the big yellow dot in the sky, right? And we all know this from a very simplistic standpoint when we see a rainbow, right? The light that comes from the sun, we would say, is white light. But we all know that the white light really breaks down, if we put it through a prism or, in the right circumstances for a rainbow, into all the colors, right? So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, right? So all those colors are in that light. So white light is not white. It's made up of a soup of many different colors. So once you got to just get that first core fundamental knowledge. So next, now we're all indoors and we turn on a light. And we see that light. We might see it as more yellow, more orange. We might see it as more white, more blue. Man-made light is one color temperature, period. So already, if you're trying to get the experience of the sun, when you turn on a light, you're locking in a single color temperature. Now, that doesn't represent all the variations that are different, but you already can see, well, wait a second, that's a problem, right? Because we're designed to be these seasonal creatures. And we have to interact with the seasons differently, and your body changes, with the seasons. We're meant to be heavier in the winter and thinner and leaner in the summer. Just look at nature. Look at a hibernating bear, right? I mean, the bear will get big and chubby and then go hibernate and come out and be lean and mean, right? And we were designed to follow that same biology. And this is what we call circadian biology. It's both a daily variation of how our body works, and it's a seasonal variation. Again, this is one of those kind of like hard to believe facts, but it's well studied, it's well published, and we know that light controls our neuroendocrine system. This is how a bunny turns his hair white. How does he know to make his coat white and blend in the winter? How does he know how to do that? Do they get the email? Does the bunny email, that says, hey, time to change your coat, and he pushes the button? No, I mean, he doesn't do anything. It all happens because the light encodes information to all your hormones. The hormones then make changes. Those changes then change the pigment of your coat, and then boom. And it's all out there. It really, this science that I understand today, none of it's new. None of it was just published. Maybe a few things like we've expanded our knowledge of, but most of this stuff was found in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Again, all this data, 70, 80 years old, but we haven't capitalized, across the board on how to utilize this information in health. But, it's only because a lot of this is lifestyle, right? In other words, I have glasses as well as software that change the light exposed to me while we speak on Zoom.
So that's what I'd love to pick up this and have you talk a little bit. What are those glasses and the screen on your computer screen doing?
Yes. So let's get back to that rainbow idea, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue. And if you think of light as buckets of these different colors, right? If I had the sun, this is kind of a little bit of an exaggeration, but the sun would be like an even amount of each color. So if I poured in each respective color paint into the bucket, and I look at all the buckets from sunlight, it's about the same. Okay? Again, I'm exaggerating here because just so you can have a mental picture of this.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's imagine the LED screen that we're looking at. That screen is overflowing with blue paint. It has no red paint. It has maybe a little yellow, orange, and green, maybe a little bit of bump of green, but mostly blue paint. So that's a very, so like 3 buckets with 1 or 2 mostly filled up. That's the LED screen we're looking at. And so then you have to ask yourselves, well, that's very different from the sunlight. So what does that mean? Well, and it's not that blue light, the blue frequency is bad. It's that nature used the high power of the blue and the damaging powers of the blue to be a switch to help turn things on. But in nature, blue light is always found with red and infrared light. And it turns out that red and infrared light are very anti-inflammatory. And so they can ease the damage. So nature gave you the problem and the solution together so that you can mitigate the problem. Okay? So now we come indoors and we have this unfettered blue light, which is 3 or 4 times as much blue as would be present if we went outside, and completely absent of the antidote, which is red and the infrared more specifically. And so this presents a problem. What does that mean? Well, blue light can photooxidize, parts of our cell. That basically, that's another term for rust. So blue light is rusting our bodies. And just like rust on your car, you don't want it. Well, you can deal with rust. You could get out some sandpaper, sand it down and spray it over. That takes work and energy. That's kind of why we provide, the sun provides the red light so that you minimize any rust and you don't have to do damage control. What happens when we're indoors on a screen all the time is we generate all this rust. What happens? Well, the body is this amazing reserve of energy, so it can turn on repair mechanisms. But, you can imagine this as, you're born with some bank account of energy to repair. And let's say you got $1 million of repairs that you can do. Well, but if you're, 4 years old and all you've seen is a screen and you're starting to dip into that bank account, you're not going to make it to the end. You're going to run out of money and be bankrupt on repair. And that's a synonym for disease. When you run out of the ability to access stem cells and repair mechanisms, that's when disease appears, is now you are at an energetic crisis where you don't have enough energy to get the cell to repair. You don't have enough energy to run the cell, even you can look at the worst disease that most people think of, which is cancer, which has been on the rise inexplicably. So, for the last decade in almost all categories, cancer was shown by Otto von Warburg to be a metabolic problem where there's a loss of energy. It's called Warburg metabolism. I believe he might have even won a Nobel Prize for this. But the long and short of it is cancer is a problem of low energy. So we're back to the story of physics. And, when you only think of energy as a biochemical problem, we know you can't eat your way out of cancer. There is no food that you can eat that will solve the cancer riddle. Now you can eat certainly less toxic foods. What does that do? It gives you more energy because you spend less money getting rid of the toxins, right? It's really just it's an accounting problem. I always feel like if we just knew all the numbers, we knew what our gross income was, we knew what our overhead to run our body was, we'd see that the net difference there, that's our health. That's what's left. And if we live a really good life, lifestyle-wise, we're lowering that overhead.
All right.
Great.
So you did mention briefly about it, a 4-year-old spending so much time indoors and on screens and using up their ability to repair the damage that's being done. Very, very generally speaking, what is your prediction for this whole generation that has been on screens basically since they were infants? I mean, I had a parent, raise her hand in a meeting and say, well, how do you change a diaper without a cell phone?
Right, yeah. Well, I think we already are seeing the effects of a generation born without sunlight and with only artificial light. We have juvenile diabetes numbers that we've never seen in the history of mankind that they don't know what to do with. We have juvenile obesity at rates that we don't know what to do with, that we don't have any answers for. I can tell you the answer is right in front of them. It's the light, right? In other words, the same way I explained that this affects your neuroendocrine system, this affects your hormone system, and this is how it all connects, okay? The same way the polar bear gains weight to hibernate. How did he know to gain weight when he was eating the same scraps of food that were, just dwindling well, it's the hormone story. The light changes the hormones change the metabolic function, you start to gain weight. What is the obesity crisis that we have? It's humans getting prepared for a winter and never seeing, the other side of that. In other words, the light environment is preparing us for something that's never going to happen because we live in the same light environment every day.
All the time, year round.
To survive a low light environment. So, one of the things that I think is counterintuitive, again, we're talking about physics being counterintuitive. People think obese people eat too much and that's why they're
fat.
Right? But let me explain the thermodynamic answer, which is the energy answer. When you're losing energy, you get bigger and you need to take in more energy because you're losing it. So they're not eating more food. They're eating more food to try to survive the energy crisis, right? Their body is energy deficient, so they're pouring more energy in. They're trying to solve an energy crisis. The best way they know how is adding more energy into the system. The problem is it's much more efficient to add light energy. And people don't realize that light can be turned into metabolic energy in the mitochondria, particularly the red light frequencies. Again, which you don't see when you're indoors, you got to get outside.
So as a medical doctor, what would your prescription be for time-wise, for how much time our children should be outdoors and when should that be? When you talk about the different lights from early in the morning through the middle of the day and then again, at dusk.
Yeah, so there's different utilities of the frequencies of light because as I said, and you correctly mentioned, that light does change over the course of the day, right? So it's not the same from morning till night. At sunrise, the light that you have is the visible spectrum. There is no UV light at sunrise, and you have all the red and infrared present. So at the actual sunrise, you're getting, this beautiful red and infrared light, which can be very, very healing, right? And then at some point, UV light appears. The strongest UV light is going to be at what they call solar noon. Ideally, you want to get that morning light from the sunrise until the appearance of the UVA. Those are the two missing frequencies in our life, the infrared and the ultraviolet, right? And so those frequencies of light all hold some magic in your health. Red, infrared, UVA, and UVB.
Okay, Josh, I want to ask you because our audience is going to be sitting there going, okay, I'm screwed. Now, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?
About the solution, right? Yeah, let's
specifically for people who have to use their screens for work.
Yeah.
So
what about the glasses and the app?
What should people do?
Yeah. So I wear glasses for vision as well. And so I'm wearing a special type of glasses that are modular. So my base pair of glasses have a special lens with my prescription in it so I can see, but that prescription lets UV light go through it, unlike 99% of the glasses. Then I have these magnetic clip-ons that I can add on, which have different purposes. The first clip-on that I have here, which has like a champagne, like a yellowish, a little bit yellowish tint to it, this blocks about 30-40% of the blue light. So when you're in a foreign environment, meaning not your own place, this allows me, without touching anything, to cut down on about a third or so of that unfettered blue light. So that's already a win, okay? From there, the next one is orange and amber. And this is similar in color to the really ugly glasses that I started with, which were very inexpensive, but they just look like a construction worker glasses. But this orange blocks 100% of the blue light. When do you want to do that? Well, you only want to do that if the sun is no longer present outside. So if you get up at 4 a.m. and you turn on a light, there is no blue light outside in nature, and you just told your body that the sun is up. So that's a mismatch. That's no good. But what I think I underestimate when I could talk to people is that this light in and of itself, remember, it causes the rust. So it's not just causing a timing mismatch, which in and of itself is damaging. It's causing a rust. And again, can you deal with the rust? Yes, but it costs you money, health
Right.
bucks that you don't have an unlimited supply of. And so if you're rusting unnecessarily without your knowledge, this is how it goes. And so then finally, these glasses, besides having the orange, which night blocks all of the blue light, there's a red lens, and the red lens now block all of the blue and the green, because even green light can have minuscule amounts of suppression of melatonin. Even red light can have small amounts. When you're outside, you don't want any glasses, any window, any contacts, anything blocking the sun from your eye and your skin. So in a perfect world, you'd be a nudist without glasses. You know, so again, are people going to do this? No, but you have to modify to the highest level that is appropriate, and again, it depends on how sick you are. If you're relatively healthy, then you don't need as much as if you have a really bad disease. So that's outside, nothing blocking the sun on your skin or eyes. That's ideal, but you have to build up your solar callus. So that doesn't mean that, I'm advocating going out and getting French fried, but if you start going out, here it is, we're going to be in April shortly, April and May, if you go out, you'll prepare your skin. And so when June and July and August come up, you won't French fry yourself. Then when you get indoors, it's really about, is the sun out or is the sun not out? When the sun is out, you do want blue light. You don't want to block it 100%, but you want to block it some percentage. The ways to do that are first on your eyes. Again, it'll be a yellow or champagne colored lens. Anything that's clear is not doing enough, period. There's a lot of clear coatings and things, and you'll be in a store and they'll say blue blocking readers and they're clear. Don't waste your money. It's not doing anything for your health. And then after that, once the sun goes down, you don't want any blue light. So it's got to be either orange or red. Obviously, red gets more intense. It's harder to navigate the world with a red lens. I would say, you start with the orange, and then once you get good with that, you could add the red as you get closer to bedtime, like a half hour, an hour before bed. So it really kind of dials in, generating melatonin and turning off any light signal.
Man, oh man, Josh, it's really complicated.
It's complicated. The sad news, but it really isn't as hard as you think. You really just need to understand, am I indoors, am I outdoors? Is the sun out, is the sun down? And then say, is blue light present or not? And then you need to wear an appropriate filter to block that. For the eyes, great. For the computer, there's software like Iris and Flux. Then, for bulbs, you have to start getting more creative. Incandescents have a tiny bit of blue, but very little blue light compared to the LED and the other stuff. But that's what most people have, right? So most lighting that you're going to buy is toxic. That's just really the answer.
Dr. Joshua Rosenthal, board-certified sleep physician and nationally recognized expert on how our body responds to light. You can learn more about Joshua and his amazing work at quantumlifewellness.com or joshuarosenthalmd.com. I'll put those links on our show page at greenstreetnews.org, where you can also find links to all of our previous Green Street shows and a contact button where you can tell us what you think of the show. That's going to do it for this edition of Green Street. Patti and I will be back next week with another edition of the show. Thanks for listening.